Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. It is my pleasure to have Craig Andrews on the show today. Craig, you are the principal ally and founder of a marketing agency called Allies for Me. And I'm really excited to get into how you look at marketing and the customer journey and that sales journey, that word that a lot of us don't like to use, sales, right? But before we do that, let's get into your story and your journey. Thank you for being here today.
Annika, it's such a delight to be here. I've been looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on Your Brand Amplified.
I'm happy that you're here. So I was reading a little bit about your background, and I know you've studied abroad, you were in the military, you also were an engineer. And then how did that shift to marketing go? So let's wind it back a little bit.
Yeah, life has not been a straight path for me. You know, in high school, I was not what the teachers called a model student. And at some point, I realized that my 2.54 GPA would not get me into any university anybody had ever heard of. Mm-hmm. So I realized it was time for a change in my life. And that change came in the form of the United States Marine Corps. And so I went in that for 6 years. Fantastic time. One of the best times of my life. And the Marines took me a lot of places. One of the places that took me most was to Japan. I lived about 30 miles from Hiroshima. Wow. And when I was over there, I started picking up the language and eventually went back and studied at Nagoya University. And while working on my engineering degree, so I got a minor in Japanese. I went into engineering because I wanted to create things. I had this view that, if you want to be creative, if you want to build things, you need to be an engineer. Wow, I got that one wrong. I mean, I had a dream job. I was a design engineer. Most engineers are not design engineers. Right. I was a design engineer. Not only was I a design engineer, I was designing cell phones in the 1990s.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And for one of the top 3 mobile phone makers in the world. And so it was a dream job. And I was just miserable because it's not a creative place. It's not. And I just knew I wasn't happy, and I should have been happy. Mm-hmm. So I started digging in to try to understand myself better and what made me turn. And if you think about, if you're familiar with Myers-Briggs, almost every engineer on the planet is a ISTJ. And the key thing is a sensor. What can I measure? What's here? What's that? And at the time, I was scoring as a INTJ, intuitor, and found out that that's kind of a minority of the population and had different needs. I seek satisfaction in different ways in work, and wasn't going to be found in engineering. So I thought, well, let me try marketing. And so for about a decade, I marketed semiconducttors for mobile phones.
Okay. So stayed in the same industry, but just a different side of it.
I did. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. And that took me all over the place. I'm over at Nagoya University right as Japan is entering the lost decade. And so instead of Japanese being kind of the language that would, everybody thought Japan had endless growth opportunities.
Right.
But even though, most of my business I did in Taiwan and China and Korea, a little bit in Japan, understanding the Asian mindset was really valuable there. Because there's some common threads. If you understand a few things about how the Japanese operate and do things, figuring that out for Taiwan and Korea and China is very easy. And so I did that, and it was a lot of fun. But, for you to get a mobile phone, I mean, they used to be about $100. Now they're up to $1,000, but they have amazing amounts of technology in it. And for them to be able to package that much technology into that $1,000 package, the cost pressures, the margin pressures on what I did was just insane. We had a downward price slope of 20% per year. And sorry, we're getting a little technical in the economics here, but the investors expected us to have 40 to 50% gross margins. And so if your cost, So if your cost curve's going down 20% a year and your margin expectations are 40 to 50%, basically you had to take half the cost out of your product every single year.
Oh my gosh.
And I knew the day was coming when they would make me fly coach to Asia. And I knew when that day came, I was done. I used to go to Asia 4 or 5 times a year. Sure enough, the day came, I was like, sorry, not flying to Asia 4 or 5 times a year in coach so you can make millions of dollars off my work.
Right.
And I'd been pretty successful. I drove over $500 million of revenue in that world. And I thought, well, I'll just take my genius to the rest of the world. And it's funny. That's been an awakening. So when I run across my buddies from the semiconductor world, they ask me what I've been doing. And I tell them I've spent the last decade learning how little I know about marketing.
Oh. Well, marketing is ever changing. I've been in marketing in different aspects of it for decades, but every time I interview somebody, I learn something that I didn't know before, right? Just a new technique or something that is about to happen because they had a conversation with somebody at one of these companies that pulls the strings that we all need to be aware of. So you're never going to stop learning.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is we were driving, hundreds of millions of dollars. But the marketing tools that we were using were really basic. I mean, the marketing in that world is not impressive, which is shocking considering the amount of money behind it.
Right. And it's technology. You think forefront, future, you're going to have the best of everything.
Yeah. There's a co-working space I work out some of the time. Saw a bunch of books strewn out on the calendars and somebody was giving away books. And I saw there Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational. And I don't know if you've read that. You should. I picked it up and I said to somebody there, I was like, if you haven't read this book, you should read it. It's just mind-blowing. And that's part of my whole journey of discovering how little about marketing that I know. And he talks in that book about, I went through school, it's kind of traditional economics. People, traditional economics assumes rational behavior. And Dan Ariely is in behavioral economics. And he's like, not only is it not rational, but it's predictably irrational. And if you can harness that predictability, you will do much better. Just an amazing work. But again, things, tools that are just untapped and in the part of the high tech world I was in.
Yeah. So was that when you moved into the marketing side? Is that when you started your company that exists today?
Yeah. So after about a decade marketing in semiconductors, then I started my own business to help others with marketing. And, originally I was trying to make some product that would help tech companies market their products based, again, on what I had done, and started getting some serious traction with, I think they were still called Agilent at the time, as a spinoff of Hewlett Packard, multi-billion-dollar company. And all of a sudden, one day, my inside guy moved. And then all of our efforts died with that. And so then I had to start scrambling. And one day I was just having lunch with somebody and he said, hey, can you take a look at my website? I'm not sure if I have everything right. And I said, I'm sure it's right. I just assumed, he was a successful guy. I figured he had everything right. And I took a look at him and was like, oh, no, there's a little bit of work you need to do here. And he said, can I pay you to fix it for me? I'm like, nice. Oh, yeah. I like the way that sounds.
Yeah, definitely. So tell us about the name Allies for Me.
Everybody needs an ally.
Yeah.
Everybody needs an ally. You and I in the green room, you and I were talking about a little bit of my story of, how allies kind of came to my rescue in my time of need. We all need allies in life.
Yeah. Well, I love that because it really frames who you are, what you do, and what you want to do. It's very aspirational and inspirational at the same time.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, no, I'm just telling you the truth. So as I see it, at least, and I'm sure all of your customers as well and your team. So tell us, what part of marketing do you focus on with Allies for Me? Or is there one specific area? And then I want to get into, because I know you do a lot with sales and conversions and you have a different technique to this.
We can put together kind of broad marketing strategies from first touch all the way to post customer. We don't believe marketing stops when somebody, writes a check or pulls out their credit card. But, if we were to talk about one thing that we figured out that we don't see a lot of other people doing is we have something we call an irresistible first time offer. And first off, let me say we work exclusively with people that do high ticket products and services. Okay. So if you can buy it on Amazon, we're not the right folks. And so one of the challenges with that is moving somebody to a level of trust where they're going to write that big check to you. And in the current economy, that's gotten a lot harder. A couple of years ago, it was a lot easier. Now it's hard. Well, I had the benefit of some hard times years ago where I was having trouble closing business. I was trying to grow my business and I would do the proposal game. Yeah. And dump 20, 30 hours into proposal and you win 1 out of 3. And I was like, oh, this is miserable. And so what we came up with, and we didn't invent anything new. We just kind of took what was there and kind of modified it. So years ago, let me give you 2 examples. Years ago, there was Columbia House Records, back when albums were popular the first time. You remember buy 13 albums for a penny?
Yes. I think my sister did the albums by the time I was at the right age that I could actually check the box that I was 13 or whatever. It was cassette tapes.
Cassette, yeah. So, and it's a great offer because if you're the type of person that wants to build an album, record collection or a cassette collection, hey, we will get you 13 steps closer to your goal for 1 penny.
Yeah. And then it renews and you have to keep paying. But you're right. That's an irresistible offer.
Yeah. And so that works for simple offers. And this is some of the hard lessons I learned in the process is when you're not doing a record club, you're doing something a lot more complex. The complexity of your offer needs to match of your first time offer needs to match the complexity of your core offer. Let me give an example of one. We didn't do this one, but everybody will immediately understand and identify with this. There was a guy named Bob Stupak who bought some dumpy old hotel at the end of the Vegas Strip. It was like a Motel 6 quality hotel. It then became the Stratosphere. I think they more recently renamed it the Strat, but he renamed it to Bob Stupak's Vegas World. And his offer was, give me $396 and I will give you 3 days and 2 nights in one of my deluxe suites. When you arrive, there will be a bottle of champagne waiting for you in your room. All of your drinks on property are free, whether you're gambling or not. Even if you're sitting in one of our entertainment lounges, you pay nothing more for your drinks. Not only that, but for your $396, I will give you $600 of chips to use in my casino. So I love this example for a few reasons. One, that's a complex offer. There's 4 deliverables. We moved from a simple, you give us a penny, we'll give you 13 albums.
Right.
To now we have 4 deliverables. The $396 was a discount off the published rate for the room. So that was a deal. Bottle of champagne free. All the drinks you could drink on property. That adds up quickly if you like to drink. And then $600 of free money to use in our casino. But Bob Stupak understood the lifetime value of his customers. And he knew that if he gave somebody $600 in chips in the casino, he was going to make a lot of money.
Right.
And that offer does something else truly amazing. It divides. If you're the type of person that likes to drink and gamble, it's hard to say no to that offer.
I'm not the kind of person who likes to drink and gamble, but I still am like, I would gamble with $600 that somebody else gave me, not my own $600.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I would probably stay somewhere else. I would probably turn it down because that's not my thing. But, I was in Vegas once. If you've been to Vegas, you have to walk through the casino. You can't walk down this. I think they route people off the street through the casino just across the street. And so I'm walking through the casino and I see a single deck blackjack table. And I think I could probably win there because I'm pretty good at counting cards and remembering things. And I stopped and I thought about it. I was like, okay, well, how much money would I spend there?
Right.
Like, well, I may devote $50 or maybe $100 to that. I was like, okay, what's a reasonable expectation of what you'll win? I was like, all right, if I just knock the cover off the ball, I would double my money. And I just asked myself, okay, is the stress of all that worth and the lost time worth making $50 or $100? And I was like, no. And that's just how I make decisions.
Yeah. But I see your point in that for the person who likes to gamble and drink and wants to really is a typical what you think of for Las Vegas, that is an amazing offer. And that's going to create that brand loyalty. They're not going to want to leave and go somewhere else because they want to get those free drinks, which means that they're going to run out of that $600 in free chips and they're going to spend a lot of their own money.
Exactly. Well, and here's something else that's amazing about that offer. Bob Stupak doesn't want me staying in his rooms because he knows he will make the most money if every one of his rooms is occupied by somebody who likes to gamble and drink.
Right.
And so he doesn't want me there.
Right. With
his offer, he's able to bring in his best and his ideal customers that made him very successful. And so when we're looking at putting together, for high ticket products or services, a lot of times it's services, we aim to do that where it attracts the best clients and repels those who would not be the best clients.
So will you explain what do you consider a high ticket offer? Yeah.
I love that question. Because it's easy to mess it up. High ticket offer is high ticket in the perception of whoever's writing the check.
Okay.
So let me give an example. I was talking to somebody, I was at a mastermind a few weeks ago, and I said, what are you doing? He said, I work in the education space. I teach English. Oh, okay. How much does your program cost? He says $50. Okay. Now he teaches in Latin America. Okay. And I said, what's the average monthly income of somebody who's buying your course?
Yeah.
He said, about $1,000, maybe $2,000. Well, guess what? To them, that is high ticket.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And so that's the thing. It really depends. It's purely in the mind of whoever's writing the check. Now, if you're hanging out, in Beverly Hills, people sneeze and have $50 fall out of their pocket. That's the thing, is it really depends. And our whole concept of a first-time offer is focused on building the trust necessary for somebody to make that high-ticket, high-trust commitment. Sometimes it's more about trust than it is money. So if you're dealing with a financial advisor, there's so much emotion tied up in somebody's life savings. Maybe it's somebody that's only saved a couple $100,000, but there's so much emotion tied up into that. And that you're not going to retire off the fees that they charge on $200,000 under management. But the emotion there and the amount of trust that's required to close that is enormous because it represents so much more than money. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what it's about when we're putting together these offers, are how can we build a huge amount of trust in a very short time so that they feel good about making the next step.
Okay. I like this. I feel like there are a lot of people who try to talk about, hey, let us help you sell a high ticket offer. But I don't know how many of these people, I think they're really good at doing it for themselves. And then they try to sell it the same exact way for everybody else that they get into their funnel. And I don't know that that's always effective. So I like everything you're saying about high ticket offer can be different depending on what your market is, depending on what your product is, or, your product or your service. And that it can be different and nuanced depending on that audience.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I have my fun. I love meeting all the people in the world and, the problems that they're trying to solve. And it's not one size fits all. Mm-hmm. There's a little more of an emotional point. We can talk about this in a little more detail, but I had a tough bout a couple of years ago that still physically recovering from. And whenever I meet a new doctor, the first thing I tell them is, I'm not like the rest of your patients. You can't assume I'm like the rest of your patients because, if you look at what I've been through and you realize how few people survived it, there are things different about my body. Maybe there's some things that were different about my body going into that. Right. There's definitely things that are different about my body coming out of it. I mean,
let's talk about that because you'd already had your company. It was successful. You're running your business, have a beautiful wife, you're loving life. So what happened a few years ago?
Yeah. So August 10th of 2021, I walked into the hospital and I walked up to the desk and I said, I'm having trouble breathing. Mm-hmm. And they immediately took me back and put me on oxygen. They gave me COVID test and they said, you have COVID.
Oh my gosh.
And initially it was funny. Oh, we're just going to send you home with oxygen. You'll be fine. And within an hour, they're like, oh yeah, no, we're going to have to admit you.
Oh, wow.
And they admitted me. It was really bizarre. I mean, when they immediately took me back, they put me behind a curtain and I heard my wife on the other side of the curtain frantic. She's like, where's my husband? Where's my husband? They're like, well, he's back there and you need to leave. It was just a really, a really hard time. And then for the next 11 days, she couldn't come in and visit me. Wow. And so we sent text messages back and Marco Polo, which is like a little video messaging. And we sent those back and forth. And then on August 21st, they told me they were going to give me something to help me sleep. Turned out they gave me an armful of morphine, which, it suppresses respiration, turns out, which is probably not good if you're having trouble breathing. And so they called my wife a few hours later and said, hey, we're going to need to put your husband on the ventilator. And she said, well, he doesn't want to go on the ventilator. And they said, well, if he doesn't, they actually laughed at her. And they said, if you don't, he's going to be dead in 24 hours. And she said, well, how many people have you had survive the ventilator? And they said, none have survived. Mm-hmm. This was the Delta variant of COVID. And the basic formula was if you went on the ventilator, you died. That's what happened. And sure enough, a couple of days later, I went into kidney failure. Then my lung collapsed. And they were telling her the whole time, your husband's going to die. But she did something pretty awesome. Well, she did a lot of things awesome. But, the doctors were saying, well, you can't visit. And she said, wrong answer. If he's going to die, he's not going to die alone. And so she kind of bullied her way into the hospital and she came to me. They gave her an hour a day. And so for an hour a day, she came in And she'd sing to me and she'd pray over me and she'd say words of encouragement. And she's touched me. She touched my body a lot, which is really important. And it was lights out for me for 6 weeks. And they actually had her meet with hospice to plan the day they were going to pull the plug. And when I woke up 6 weeks later, something really fascinating happened. My trust in the doctors had plummeted during the 6 weeks I was out, while my trust in my wife had gone through the roof.
Oh, okay.
And it was funny. The doctors would come and say, hey, we want you to do such and such. Now, at the time, my brain was really scrambled. I wasn't thinking clearly. But the one thing I knew was I didn't trust the doctors. And so anytime they came by asking, hey, can we do this? I was like, no. And so they had to go through my wife, and she would come to me and she'd say, hey, the doctors want you to do this. And I'd ask her, is it safe? And she'd say, oh, yeah, it's safe. And as soon as she said yes, I was okay with it. And like I said, my brain was scrambled. It turns out for the 6 weeks I was out, I was living in a different world, a dream world. Oh. And my dreams were so vivid. I still remember them today.
Oh, my gosh.
But I believed they were reality. And it took me about a week and a half after waking up, one, to see people responding to, I'd say something that I thought was completely true. And they would give me weird looks. And I started realizing what they believe about the reality and what I believe about reality are different. And so I called my wife over and I said, hey, I'm going to tell you some things. And I need you to tell me if these things really happened or not. And the first thing I asked her about, I said, have we been to Louisiana? She said, no, we haven't been to Louisiana. And so I started telling her about going to Louisiana to a resort to convalesce.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's a wild dream where, as a part of my convalescence, people would come in, they'd spray raw cow's milk at my face.
Oh, okay.
It would make me feel better. Then they wanted me to leave, and they kept getting upset with me because I wouldn't leave. I told them, I said, look, I can't move. Somebody's going to have to come in and get me. And at one point they said, let's get his wife. And I said, and you came in, you put your hand on my left shoulder and you said, Craig, this is Karen. I'm your wife. It's going to be okay. And when I told Karen this, she said, Craig, I said that. Oh. And so her messages came through to me in my coma. And I mean, there's so much. This has been certainly one of the hardest experiences in my life because I've had to learn to walk again as an adult. But it's also been one of the richest, probably the richest experience in my life.
Yeah.
And there's a truth kind of tying this back to marketing that comes out of that. And it reminds me of a Maya Angelou quote. Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
Exactly.
And while the doctors were speaking death and despair into me, my wife was speaking life and hope.
Yeah. And love.
And love. Yeah.
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 That's amazing.
And it just transformed the trust equation.
Yeah.
And so if we tie that back to the whole first time offer, what I realized is we're creating an environment where we're changing the way people feel. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about branding, a lot of definitions out there about branding. But when I think about branding, I think about when I look at a company's logo, what does it make me feel? If I look at like a Walmart logo, I think, oh, ucky stores filled with people who hate their jobs, versus looking at a Target logo, it gives me a different feeling. And so if we think about branding, when you make people feel in a way that they can trust you, in the way that my wife made me feel, that I didn't trust the doctors, but I did trust her. When you are affecting emotions at that level, you're unlocking opportunities at levels that are just hard to describe.
Yeah.
And the best way I found to do that is come along with somebody and help them solve a small problem. When you help them solve a small problem, they trust you more to solve the big problems. Not only do they trust you more, but all of your competitors on the outside, they now look dangerous and scary. They're unknown. They're unproven. You are the trusted supplier because you got in there and you helped them solve a small problem. And if you do for them what my wife did for me, speak hope and life into them and love, it's amazing. And I had a call this morning where we were wrapping up the third workshop of one of our first time offers with a client that's kind of moving through our sales process. And they came to kind of a harsh reality of, they said, you know what, the biggest exclamation mark that I would put on what we've done here is we don't understand our customers nearly as well as we should.
Yeah.
Those aren't things I told them. I created an environment, a loving, a caring environment that helped them reach that conclusion. a safe environment. And because it was safe, they felt safe in admitting that.
Yeah. I love that. I think the hardest things for a client to realize, but one of the best things about what we do is when we take them on a journey and they realize, wow, I thought I've been speaking to this audience, but I actually want to speak to this audience. And this is what's going to make me feel really good about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's life-changing.
It is. And, it's a privilege to be the person kind of ushering them on that journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And thank God that you're here today, as I feel like you have so much to share with the world. And, not just your marketing information, which obviously is also really impactful, but just your story and who you are. What happened to your company during that time? Because you were in the hospital for quite a while.
Yeah, I was in the hospital for 3 months.
Said you had to relearn how to do a lot of things.
When I woke up, I could wiggle a finger and a toe. I couldn't lift an arm or a leg. Actually, one of my first memories of being awake was I was feeling around my fingers. I was looking for my wedding ring. My wedding ring was missing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I guess they take that off in the hospital.
Well, if your hands swell up or something,
Well, it almost got lost. They actually lost it for a few days, and my wife was able to recover it. And so, I lost 40 pounds in the hospital. All my muscles melted away. And so, yeah, I had to learn how to walk. I mean, the first thing I had to learn was how to sit up in bed. And that was hard and painful and scary. I know that sounds weird, but it was scary. And, a couple of weeks after I sat up in bed, they transferred me to a rehab hospital. And my first day, Karen will tell you this, I arrived on a Friday night. And Saturday morning, they said, okay, we're going to get you in the wheelchair. It took me 30 minutes to get from out of the bed into the wheelchair. And the wheelchair, by the way, was beside the car bed. It wasn't around the corner.
Yeah, right.
It was right there beside the bed. But it was just so scary. And I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, which is exhausting because I don't have any core muscles. Things you don't think about, until you trying to sit up with no core muscles. It's hard. And it was funny. I remember getting in that wheelchair and thinking how wonderful it felt, because it had a back and I could lean up against it and I could relax. And I was like, lesson learned. And the next day, it just took me about 5 minutes to get in that wheelchair. It was an interesting journey. But you asked me, what had been going on with my company. Well, after my mind cleared and Karen started telling me about what had been going on in the world, she said, I found out that my team kept running the company without me. And not only that, but freelancers reached out to my team and said, as long as Craig's in the hospital, we will do whatever it takes. And that is by far the biggest accomplishment in my career.
I could not agree more. The fact that you had empowered your team to know how to do everything without you, and that they took it upon themselves to feel empowered and to want to continue this legacy. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. It still is a special memory.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. My gosh, what an inspirational story and journey you have.
Well, thank you. Not the journey I chose, but it's an interesting one.
Yeah. So I'm like, I don't even want to talk about sales. I just want to cry. So you help people come up with their first time offers. What does that process look like? And what are some of the things that you see people when they come to you? I don't want to say wrong, because I feel like everything you do is a lesson and something that you learn from and then figure out how to do it better the next time.
Let me describe it as a barrier to success.
Okay.
So it's less about being wrong. It's more of a barrier that keeps them from.
I'm going to put that on a sticky. Yeah, I like that rephrasing, that reframing.
Yeah, because it really is. I mean, the people we work with are good people that want to help the world. We don't work with charlatans or shysters. These are good people, and they keep running into this barrier. And putting together an effective first-time offer, by far the biggest barrier that they have to overcome is the relentless desire to sell. And when we help people build their first-time offers, we do it in a full-day workshop, and we have a series of exercises we go through. And those exercises are focused on developing empathy, but something more than, empathy, you would say, as a marketer, you would say, Craig, marketing is empathy. True. Yes. But we have to get them into a servant mindset. We have to get them out of a sales mindset and into a servant mindset. And once we can get them into that mindset, all of a sudden, some of the most amazing offers come out, just mind-blowingly wonderful, because they are solely focused on serving their prospect. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So 3 days before they put me on the ventilator, before they called my wife and said, hey, we're going to put him on the ventilator. And he's, your choice. He gets to die in 24 hours or he gets to die in a few weeks. I got an email from a lifetime mentor, a guy named Mike Smith. He and his wife, Brenda, I met them in Japan in the late 80s. And they have just been powerful, powerful people in my life. They've influenced my life more than anybody else other than my own parents.
Wow.
And 3 days before I went on the ventilator, I got an email from Mike saying his daughter, Kristen, had died of COVID on the ventilator. And when I got out of the hospital, Michael Jr., Kristen's brother, reached out to me and said, hey, Craig, I need some help with marketing. And I said, well, Michael, I'm taking the rest of the year off. I was learning how to walk. And I said, reach out to me later. Mm-hmm. Secretly, I was kind of hoping he would kind of go away. I just didn't want to muddle that relationship. Mm-hmm. And he reached out again. I sent him away again. And he reached out a third time. I was like, okay, let's get on the phone. And so got on the Zoom call with him. And two things became apparent quickly. One is his revenue didn't support our fees. Mm-hmm. And so there was no chance he would ever be a client, or at least not in the short term. The second thing was it was clear he needed help and he needed direction. And when I sat there and I listened to what he had going on, I realized absolutely the best advice I could give to him was to buy my first time offer. There was no better advice. It would give him a marketing plan that would set him on a direction so he could make better choices. And he would get for a bargain because it was stupid cheap. Still is. But there was another dynamic at play. So at that time, this was January of 2022, and I was wrestling with survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
I was the first one that left that ICU alive. It killed everybody before me and almost everybody after me. And I was wrestling with, why did I get to live? Mm-hmm. Why did his sister, Kristen, die? Mm-hmm. And while wrestling through survivor's guilt and knowing that I'm talking to somebody where I survived a disease that killed his sister,
right?
Still, the best advice I could give to him was buy my first time offer. And to this day, I can look his dad in the eye and say, I took care of your son.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when, for you to have a really powerful offer, you have to be focused on serving people. Mm-hmm. If you wouldn't send your best friend through your sales funnel, you've got a broken funnel.
Yeah. That's really powerful. So kind of who's your ideal client that you work with? And I don't know if you want to share that first time offer that is available for sale for maybe people who aren't there yet with their revenue.
Yeah. Our ideal client is anybody that has a high ticket product or service, usually service that requires a high level of trust. It actually could be a lot of coaches, consultants, agencies. We have a client now that does outsourced software development. So you're trusting this team to go in and change your code.
Right.
Huge level of trust. Let me put it this way. If you're in a business where you have to write competitive proposals, one, we want to get you out of the proposal business. We haven't written a proposal in years. And because a first-time offer disrupts that. So those kind of parameters would be our ideal client. So we have a number of first-time offers depending upon what people are struggling with. Mm-hmm. We have one we call FTO squared, first-time offer squared, which is a first-time offer for somebody who we think might be a good candidate for our, kind of highly customized, done with you first-time offer workshop. And it's a one-on-one workshop. And so that's one where we start building the pieces for them to be able to build their first-time offer. And it gives them enough if they want to experiment and try things and not hire us. That's an option. And that's one of the things that's really key in this is when somebody comes to us and we present the offer and it's 3 to 5 deliverables, minimum of 3, maximum of 5. And there's some reasons for that. But we tell them, we say, hey, look, once we finish this mini project, you have 3 options. One, we'll give you a plan. You'll get it in a binder. You can take it and implement it yourself. Mm-hmm. The second choice is you could take it to someone else and have them implement it for you. Mm-hmm. And the third choice is if we mutually agree, we will help you implement it. And so you're not locking people in. We're taking out risk. Think of it as a coffee date. When you go on a coffee date, you're not committing to marry the person.
Right.
You have hopes that will go to bigger, better things. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And so it's kind of freeing the customer from the tyranny of you have to commit now. And you're like, no, let's do this little mini project together. If it adds value and it makes sense and we both feel like we can work well together, we'll talk about the next thing.
Right.
And so for FTO squared, for people putting together first-time offers, our first deliverable is a transformation framework. So we believe you should sell the transformation, not the product or service.
Mm-hmm.
And so we help you map out the messaging of how you transform what somebody has, what they feel, what their average day is like, and their status. And by the way, you always get paid the most when you transform someone's status. So that's first deliverable. The second deliverable is what we call the pain gain time grid. So the hardest thing in the world to sell is future gain. So you're a marketer. What are you selling? You're selling future gain. Give me money today.
Mm-hmm.
And in some point in the future, you'll get money back.
Yeah.
That's future gain. That is the hardest thing in the world to sell. The easiest thing in the world to sell is the removal of immediate pain.
Mm.
And so what we do is we go through what they do for people, places where they deliver value, and we kind of break it into little sub units, and we map it into, there's 4 quadrants, removal of immediate pain, avoidance of future pain, immediate gain, or the promise of future gain.
Mm-hmm.
And we take all those elements and map them into the appropriate quadrant. And the bottom line is, if you want to sell first-time offers, if you want to get people to move into action, especially in this economy, focus on removing the immediate pain. Don't go around promising. And that's one of the big problems with marketing consultants. Hey, give me money now, you'll make money later.
Well, it depends on the industry. We work a lot with workforce development and education. And so we're creating their campaigns that will get more students in the door.
Yeah.
So there's no avoiding the future gain for them. But for other people, absolutely. For like our entrepreneurs or our nonprofits, I could see what you're saying working really well in terms of trying to remove immediate barriers.
Well, and so here's the thing. I've found every single time, I'll give you an example. I was wrapping up the 3rd workshop with somebody, a marketing agency this morning, and their average contract value is $1.2 million.
Okay.
And yeah, big chunk contract. And most of the value you get is the future gain content. But even with them, we were able to break it down. We were able to find areas where they remove immediate pain. They're not obvious, but that's kind of the process we go through, and we're able to pull those out. And once you go through it, all of a sudden you're like, oh, yeah.
Nice.
There is that. So that's the second deliverable. Third deliverable, once you offer somebody a first-time offer, you want to be able to put it in their hands immediately and have them be able to pay for it immediately. By the way, one of the key elements is these first-time offers have to be stupidly cheap, like the coins in the cushion, the couch, money in the wallet, or the B2B equivalent of that. Another way of putting it is, if they have to ask permission from anybody, if they can spend that money, you've priced it too high. Yeah, that's part of removing the risk, is you want to price it at a point where nobody fears that they will ever get fired or get questioned or held accountable for how that money was spent. And so when you present that, you want to be able to put an invoice in their hands immediately and have them be able to pay immediately. And so we benchmark what they have, and we make recommendations on infrastructure changes they can make to speed up that process. That's the third deliverable. Fourth deliverable, one of the fears that people have is, hey, if I do this, people will see us as low value or desperate, which is funny because that's never been an issue that we've had. And so at one point, after I'd heard that a number of times, I said, well, why have we not had that problem? And we realized that there were some critical elements in structuring this to make sure nobody ever viewed you as low value. And so that's the fourth deliverable, is how to position your first-time offer so people see you as high value. And then the fifth deliverable is a sales playbook to sell first-time offers, because the traditional sales playbook doesn't work with first-time offers. And if you try it, it's going to fail. It just won't work out. So we offer them a sales playbook that closes first-time offers like butter.
Nice.
And so that's an example. See, that's 5 deliverables, 3 to 5 deliverables. And, there's some other elements in there, and you see in that we're helping them solve a problem.
Right.
And we're going in, we're helping them solve a problem, but we're not solving it for them in isolation. We're solving it with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the powerful thing, is when you go in, and a lot of it is, you're basically playing the role of a counselor. You're not there to give the answers. You're there to ask the questions. My expertise is knowing the questions to ask that will arrive at the answers they want. And because it's their answers, it does a couple things. It triggers a couple cognitive biases, including the IKEA effect and the endowment effect. But the other thing is, when they do that, they have their fingerprints all over the solution. And so for them to not move forward would require that they reject their own ideas.
Yeah. I think that I could interview you for hours, but I know we're running to our time limit. I know you have a special offer for our audience, so I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And we'll also link it in the show notes.
Okay. When I set out to build my first time offer, my first one failed. Nobody understood it. Nobody wanted it. Nobody bought it.
Okay. Wow.
My next one failed. The one after that failed, but not as bad. And it took about 18 months to sort of start getting those working. And then, we perfected that over the last 5 years. And so I put together a guide so you can avoid some of the mistakes that I've made. And so we have that for your audience. We also have a course, a self-paced course, where we give them 23 days access to the course.
Oh, nice.
And here's why we do 23 days.
Okay.
If you're like me, you've signed up for some free course that somebody offered,
oh, yeah.
and you've never logged in. It's never changed your life. Yeah. That's human behavior. And we study, as marketers, we study human behavior. We're in the business of changing lives. And so we realize that if we put a 23-day limit on the course, people go in and they use it. We see it in the analytics, people going through the course. It excites us when we see that. And so that's the reason for the 23-day limit. So if your audience goes to our website, which is alliesforme.com, that's spelled ALLIES, the number 4, ME.com/your brand amplified. All one word, all lowercase. If they go to that, alliesforme.com/your brand amplified, they will get both of those gifts.
Fantastic. While you were saying that, I went ahead and signed up for it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, now I just have to keep myself accountable to actually do it. So this has been an amazing, inspirational interview. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I definitely want to keep in touch after this. But Craig, I want to know, so we know where people are going to go. I'll also put it in the show notes, but I wanted to see if you had any final words of inspiration, whether you have a family motto, a quote, a mantra, a verse that you live by.
Oh, wow. Let me frame it this way. I've had some people ask me, as a matter of fact, just today, I had somebody ask me, Craig, do you consider yourself successful? And I told them, I said, I have a wonderful wife that has overwhelmingly demonstrated her love. And I have a faith in God that's carried me through, just a hard road. And, I have a team that stood for me. Well, I couldn't imagine being more successful.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I am very inspired and motivated by you and your story, your journey, and everything your wife poured into you and your team poured into you, and the impact that you're making on businesses and just humanity. So thank you for being here.
Annika, it's been a delight. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you.
Of course. And to our audience, thank you for being here and listening to this amazing person's story. Please check out the tools. I think this is something that there's not a single person who won't find value in what you're offering us. And thank you for being here. I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert.
Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.